You know, if I said something like that, you'd call me a snob.
Hello, everybody. How are you? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome to the channel. If this is your first time, I'm dressed in a way that I never ever dress unless I have to. But I thought it'd be fun. And this is a bit of a reference, shout out or whatever to Greg from another Bibliophile Reads, who dressed up very smart for his response to this tag. And I thought it'd be nice to do the same thing. Plus, I did this for the thumbnail, so I thought I'd keep it on. So, this is actually two tags because there was a tag that was created about book snobs a number of years ago that I noticed Brian had done from Bookish, and I thought those questions were really good. So I'm going to do both questions. So that one from ages ago was called the Book Snob Book Tag, and then this other one is the Snob-A-Meter Book Tag, I think it's called. So I'm going to do both. And I'm also going to start off by just doing some background chat about snobs and the whole subject, because I think it's a really interesting subject. And ultimately, this entire thing, and every other video is about this, every other version of this tag is about judgmental people. That's what this tag's about. That's what snobbery is about. It's about judgmental people. And there's two things I dislike the most in this world, and I was talking about this to, I can't remember who it was. I was talking to someone about the current US administration and Trump and all that. And I was talking about how much I really can't stand arrogance. Arrogance does my head in. Arrogance and self-importance and putting down others and all that, you know. And that's a character of the current Trump thing. But obviously, in reference to this, that's actually quite common in general. There's I know lots of arrogant people, but there are actually condescending people on my corner of BookTube, which is a shame. But I watch their videos anyway to enjoy the bits of it that's not condescending, if you like, because obviously we're all multifaceted. There's lots of things to us, and we can't just define ourselves by one thing. But there's definitely an element of condescension in some content creators' videos. I'm not going to name them because that's not my style, but that element does, you know, put a little bit of a damper on my affection for those channels and for my enjoyment of the videos. But I do still enjoy some aspects of those videos. But I really don't like arrogance or any kind of condescension or any judgment like that kind of thing. So this is why this video in particular is probably one I feel probably quite passionate about. And on that note, I want to just do a massive shout out to Ollie from Ollie, because his entire channel has been consistently breaking down the snobbery thing. So I can't wait to see his response to this. He said in last week's wrap up that I'm pretty sure he said he's going to do the snobbery tag this week. So that'd be great to see. But in the meantime, his channel is the best example of praising and encouraging reading. He's an absolutely fantastic ambassador for reading, but it's not because this is what you should read or because these are the classics. This is the stuff that is worth reading. He just encourages everybody to read anything. It's fantastic. And obviously Garb August was all about that. And for some people it took a while to get used to that, and I knew that there would be some resistance to it, or there would be some people trying to redefine it. And I was one of the original co-hosts, and you could see in the co-hosts, some were struggling more than others, and some were just going, yeah, and really loving it, you know. Andrew from It Came From The Page, he's another one that absolutely champions what is regarded as trash fiction, and he absolutely loved it. It was great for him to celebrate the stuff that he loves. And that's the thing. Reading is just reading. We shouldn't be making judgments on what people read. So, yeah, I just want to talk about that. But I also wanted to talk about music snobs. So this is probably going to extend the video a little bit, so I apologise if it's a long video. But I do think, you know, that snobs can be found anywhere. And I have probably encountered more music snobs than literature snobs because of the fact I worked in the music industry for so long. Well, the music retail industry for so long. I am an active musician as well, but I I don't find music snobs as much in the performance end of the music industry and the creation and production end of the music industry, but certainly the retail industry. When I was dealing with customers for 15 years, so I worked in record shops for 15 years, and 4 of those years were in HMV, so it was a big store, and you didn't get as much snobbery. But 11 years of those years, I worked in a specialist shop. So in that specialist shop, it's one of the greatest moments in my life. I mean, those 11 years were so important to me, and I'll explain something about the significance of how much I grew as a person in the shop anyway. But definitely one of the aspects of the 11 years I spent in the specialist shop was coloured by the fact that that shop specialised in classical music and jazz. Those were the 2 biggest areas in the shop. So obviously I mean classical music in a general sense, so I don't need someone to correct me and say, well, what do you mean by classical music? Yes, I mean romantic music, the classical period, Baroque, early music, choral music, opera, operetta, the whole range. It was a specialist shop. It was well known throughout the country, and we used to do lots of mail order and all that sort of stuff. And there was a massive jazz section as well, because classical music and jazz music, even though they're quite different forms of music, they sit in a very similar world as far as the customer base and as far as the industry respect and the potential for snobbery. And weirdly, even though I'd say the majority, this is from experience, so it sounds a bit odd, this is definitely from my experience in that shop in Portsmouth, the majority of the jazz fans, the jazz buying public in that shop were working class, and they were also real snobs about pop and rock and pop, popular music, rock music. They weren't as snobby about classical music, even though they didn't necessarily buy it, but they held it on a high regard, and they thought it was above them rather than below them. But everything else that wasn't jazz, they regarded it as below them, very often. And the classical fans spread across a wider variety of people, but as far as class goes, surprisingly, they weren't all middle class or upper class or whatever. Lots of working class classical fans, but again, loads and loads of them, I wouldn't be able to give you a statistic, but loads of them were very judgmental about popular music, pop and rock. There were obviously a huge wave of them that would just listen to anything and just loved the best of all of that. And I truly believe there is great stuff in every genre. But that was something that I encountered a lot. And I wanted to talk about Jeff, the closest thing really I've had, or the strongest thing, the most impactful person I've ever had as a father figure. So I've said a little bit about my family history with my dad, but not that much. But ultimately, I've had a whole life of, until, I don't know, recently when I've got a lot older myself, I'd say up to my 30s, I suppose, I had various father figures. And Jeff was the most important one, the one that changed my life the most. And he owned the shop. He owned the record shop. And he was an absolute musical snob. We'd have many, many discussions all day while we're working about whether there was any merit in popular music. And I remember him only saying, he said he thought there was merit in ELO, Electric Light Orchestra, ELO, Jeff Lynne's ELO, and that's it. And I was like, okay, so you think, so let's have a look at these songs you're talking about. And I'd give him other versions of those songs, and I'd talk to him about the complexity of some of the other forms of music that he wasn't aware of. And I'd also talk to him about lyrics and the impact of those. And, there were all sorts of things that we talk about, and musical ability as well in different bands. And, it was a very interesting part of our relationship. When I started there, I was 21, I think 21, something like that. And he was in his 60s. And by the time, when he died, he was in his mid 70s. So he was an incredibly important man. I loved him, still love him so much. And he changed my life in such a huge way. but he was an absolute snob. There's no doubt about it. So there is a question later on in one of these tags about whether I would have a friend who is a snob or whether I date a snob. This is a snob that I have so much respect for. He's a musical snob. I think he was one of the greatest people I've ever known. Couldn't praise him enough. Such a great man. And I miss him dearly. But he was a snob. Absolutely. So, yeah, I wanted to talk about that. So let's get on with the questions. Okay, so let's go with this one first. Yeah, so we do this one first. So one of them I'm using my TV, the other one I'm using my phone, because I'm assuming that's going to make things quicker. So this is the Snob-A-Meter Tag that was created by That Reader Guy 28. I don't know who that is. I'm just reading it from there. But I have been tagged by a few people, I think. So anyway, what is your definition of book snobbery? My definition of book snobbery, you can kind of guess from what I've said already, is about looking down on someone else's tastes, making sweeping generalizations about certain types of literature, certain types of books, and looking down on individual people who read those things. So those are the three things I'd say. Looking down at different styles of books, sweeping generalizations about those books, and looking down on people that read those books. And sadly, you see that too much. Number two, is there a genre or type of book you would never consider reading? Okay, so I don't think I would ever not consider reading it because of the genre or type of book it was. I don't necessarily deliberately read something I don't think I'm going to like. So I clearly have an idea of what I'm going to like, but I'm not going to, if someone recommended it, I wouldn't go, well, I'm not going to read that, you know, and I'm certainly not going to look down on the book or look down on the people that do. So I think that's an important thing to qualify in this question. So, no, I don't think I would, but I don't necessarily think I travel that far out of the things I expect to like. Does erotica, the third question, does erotica count as literature? Of course it does. That's a weird question. But I guess it's because that's probably one of the most frequently looked down on forms of reading, I guess. But no, certainly not. It's a book, so I'm assuming that's what it's referring to. If it's saying, is it high literature, then I just think there's a problem with that question anyway, myself. Is it better to read, it's like a snobbish question. The fourth question, is it better to read classic books than popular bestsellers? Well, I have a better hit rate from popular bestsellers than I do classic books. Neither of which are the things I gravitate towards. So I don't gravitate towards popular bestsellers and I don't gravitate towards classic books. I'm somewhere in the middle. A lot of my favourite books are not popular bestsellers. They're not the most popular bestsellers. Some of them are, but a lot of them aren't. I'd say most of them aren't. And they're certainly not classics either. And when I read, you know, my favourite genre is science fiction. And I recently did a video, which has got a really lovely response, so thanks for that. I recently did a video just saying how, if I go into the SF Masterwork series, which is seen as classic science fiction books, I've had a real mixed experience with that series. So I don't expect greatness out of classic books. I'd love it, but I don't expect it. And I don't necessarily expect greatness out of public bestsellers, but I'd probably get a better hit rate from it. So certainly not better to read classic books anyway, to answer that question. Number 5, have you ever bragged about reading a classic to sound smart? I don't think so. Because, again, I don't really think it gives you any kudos. So the people that I do see that brag about what they've read, and you can tell sometimes from the way they're saying it, they're not presenting it as a brag, but you just think, oh my God, I can see what you're doing. And I do roll my eyes and think, really, is that what you're trying to do? And I think it's a little bit pathetic myself. But it's also going back to this thing that by doing that themselves, they're making judgments about other people. And it's full of that self-importance. And, you know, the idea that they're an expert on everything because they've read, I don't know, Monte Cristo 10 times or something. Do audiobooks count as reading? Yes, of course it does. The only people that say that it doesn't are being pointlessly scientific about it. Clearly, it's a different sense. It's not your ears. Sorry, it's not your eyes, it's your ears. So therefore they go, oh, can't be reading then. But it's exactly the same words. I would actually argue it's probably harder because you've got an extra cognitive level, to another step, because you have to hear the words, then visualize the words, then translate the words, whereas you've got them first and then you visualize the words so you can kind of see what's going on. So I personally imagine it's probably harder. I haven't got used to audiobooks yet. My mind wanders and I find it easier to read a print book. So I actually admire people who read audiobooks. Yeah, I just said it. I just said read audio. I just said it without thinking. I don't think it's worth the argument. I think it's a really weird argument. Why are you asking this argument? Why are you asking the question? Are you making a judgment on people that read audiobooks? Because if you are making that judgment, again, you're being condescending. So, I don't do that because I read print books. Number 6, it's like an extra bit of that question. What about comic books or graphic novels? Again, it's another level of looking down on a certain type of book. And I know that it stems from the fact that comic books were initially intended for children and teenagers, but if you know anything about graphic novels and comics, you know that it's developed. It's moved on from since the 80s, and now there's a lot of adult stuff out there. There's a lot of very complex stories with beautiful artwork, with fascinating characters in it, a lot of thought behind it, a lot of social commentary in it, a lot of political stuff. Some of the autobiographical graphic novels are incredible. So if you are looking down on it, you probably don't know what you're talking about. Number 7, have you ever looked down at someone for reading a popular fluff book? A book with little substance? I never have, no. Celebrity memoir? No. I don't relate to this thing. So I see it a lot, but I don't get it. I don't know why people are making a judgment on what other people are doing in their lives. Have you ever been the recipient of someone else's snobbery? Yeah, I probably have. Probably on this channel, but I don't think anyone's made a comment, but I bet you people watch that and then go, oh, I'm unsubscribing, he's an idiot, because I don't necessarily cover the classics or that kind of thing. So I don't know, but probably. I've never felt it, I don't think. Number 9, would you ever be friends with a snob? Like I was saying earlier, yes, absolutely. I think we're all multi-layered people. There's many different facets to us, and if you are a snob, there's probably other things that make you likable. So it could be a sense of humour. I don't know. Yeah, I would certainly never not be friends with a snob. It just wouldn't happen. Are people who don't read less sophisticated than people who do? Okay, so I'm going to try not to waffle with this one because I've got a very personal reaction to this, and that's because of somebody very close to my heart who is very, very sophisticated, probably the wisest person I know, certainly one of the wisest people I know, and he doesn't read. He gets all his information from other things, probably mostly videos, I guess, but he's very knowledgeable about loads and loads of different things, and his take on life is absolutely fantastic. I could stick him into any particular argument with a bunch of people that weren't relating properly, and he'd be a fantastic mediator. He's so articulate, he's so intelligent, he's so like I say, wise, and he knows what he's talking about. And he doesn't read books. He doesn't read many. He probably does read graphic novels sometimes, but he doesn't really read books. So yeah, I think he's a great example of the idea that no, it doesn't make you less sophisticated than people who do. And then this is 18 minutes already. And then the next one, measure yourself based on your answers. Yeah, I really don't think I'm a snob, and I'm pretty much an anti-snob. And that's why I wanted to praise Ollie at the beginning, because his channel does that all the time. So I'm intrigued to see what his video's like. Okay, let's nip over to the last questions, which are, I'm going to try and rattle through these because they're a little bit shorter, I think. Okay, so, I can't read it very well. So the book Snob book tag was, I didn't say it was created by, that's a pain. Okay, I'm going to have to put in the description who it was done by. So, adaptation snob. Do you always read the book before you see the movie? I try to, just so I can try and visually it myself first. But to be fair, occasionally I've just thought, I'm not going to get a chance to read it. I really want to ingest the story, so I'm going to watch the film. Quite often they're quite different anyway. But yeah, I try to. Format snob. If you had to choose only one format for the rest of your life, well, I only really experience one format, and that's not because of any snobbery. It's because I just don't get any success out of the other two. So ebooks, I again switch off and I get a little irritated because it feels like work, because I use electronic devices at work and all that. Audiobooks, again, my mind wanders, so it's not deliberate. So I use print. I love books. I love print books, but only just because I haven't any joy elsewhere, you know. So it's not a snobbery thing. Would you date or marry a non-reader? Absolutely. I am married to a non-reader, and we've been married for over 30 years, and our relationship's fantastic, and I love her very much. She's amazing. And again, very wise, very intelligent, very, you know, it's not the same person I was talking about, but again, you could, you know, my discussions with her about the world and about politics and about ethics, about philosophy are utterly nuanced, but she doesn't read. If you had, genre snob, you have to ditch one genre and never read it again. Which would it be? Well, I don't really read romance books, so if I could ditch that, but again, it doesn't mean I look down on people that read it. I just don't read it. But I'd love to find one that I'd really love. That'd be really cool. Community snob. Which genre do you think receives the most snobbery? I made a little note about this, and I feel like because it's so long, this video, I might not get to the music snob stuff. I might do it as a separate video. I'd say the ones that encountered the most snobbery are YA, graphic novels, actually science fiction, and westerns. But I hear it a lot with YA, and I praised a book that was YA not recently, but a little while ago, and there were a few people that I was reading it with that just said, yeah, I couldn't get on with it just because it was YA. So I do think that's a bit of a thing sometimes. And have you ever been snubbed for something you've been reading? No, I don't think so. I think when people see that I'm a reader, some people, the younger generation, are surprised because they don't read as much, because it's not quite as fashionable as it used to be. But they don't snub me. It's not a negative thing. They just go, oh, you know, you got a book, you know, you read. So yeah, I'll tell you what. I'll quickly say something about the music snob thing, because I talked about Jeff at the beginning. And I'll just say, in general, over the years, I've encountered quite a lot of music snobs. I'd say snobbiness in music, in the general music fanatic, music geek, they will probably be snobby about bubblegum pop, manufactured pop that's been done by a committee with a manufactured band. That gets a lot of snobbery, and yet some of my favourites, well, not some of my favourite songs, but I love the songs of the Monkees, and they're like a really good example of that. And I love some of Elvis's songs, and he was a manufactured act, and all that kind of thing. Although I was pretty savage about the Sex Pistols recently in one of my lessons, because I was covering punk and I compared them to the Clash. The Clash were absolutely legitimate. They believed in what they were singing, and the Sex Pistols were manufactured. So I did want the students to know that, because I think it's an important element to the history of punk that the Sex Pistols were a manufactured band. And EDM gets a lot of flack as well, a lot of snobbery, and folk music gets snobbery sometimes. Punk gets snobbery from the more academic fans of music. Yeah, I'd say that in those years I was working in that shop, the classical and jazz fans just completely wrote off popular music in general, and didn't really understand the complexity of some of the music out there. And obviously, it goes without saying, there are millions and millions and millions of fantastic music out there, and all from different genres. So there we are. I did actually do those last questions quite quickly. It's not quite as I was thinking, oh God, is this going to be like an hour long? But I did that last bit quite quickly. Hopefully that's garnered a little bit of discussion. This was a book tag I was a little bit nervous of, because I feel quite strongly about it. But I'm looking forward to seeing what Ollie says about this. And thanks for watching. Stay curious about everything, not just the stuff that makes you look good.
Picture of what it's like to be